Yeah, first of all, thanks for your presentations. In the line of the the beef plan movement, I think it may be worthwhile for us here in trying to solve a problem and not having the committee, and it's up to the chairman. The 125 kilometre the law on that for the waste transport rule is with the Department of Transport, and it may be worthwhile that this committee or whatever, that's up to yourselves, put in a submission to the Department of Transport on that, because there was one as well, Chairman, you might remember, a moving straw on that before, and I think that's where we need to tackle that. You know, it's just a thing I'm throwing out there. The beef plan movement. What's your position in the line in regarding forward contracts with retailers, and probably maybe the role of developing a new brand of suckler beef or whatever? I'd like to know your views on that. And in the line of, say, climate change, you know, in the line of sustainability and all that everyone is on about, what's your view in the line of the suckler herd on that, where we're going forward on that? To meet MII, right, here are a few facts from what you've told us. 338 farmers, or whatever you want to call them, feedlots, or whatever we want to call them, right, A's, produced 18–19% of the beef in this country. It means that if we keep going down the road, we're going down that about 1,350 farmers would be able to produce all the beef in this country, what ye have required last year. If you do the figures, is it sustainable, guys, that 338,000 farmers will run through 1,000 cattle each? And are ye going to sell a product out abroad stating that it was reared through grass? Because I come from a farm background, and most of us here does. And let's be honest out there. The small family farm produces an animal reared on grass or whatever. Free roam. But them cattle, and let's not be kidding ourselves, are within sheds most of the time. And I think it's time now we call a halt to the feedlot system that's going on, that's mostly controlled by factories, and let them not be denying it. There's a backdoor system going on in it. If it's not coming in the front door, it's coming in the back door. And I think that has to be called out once and for all. And are ye afraid of that? Are you worried about that? And explain to me, you talked about, and fair enough, I agree with you, that retailers around wherever you're buying them, be it Aldi, Tesco, Lidl, will say we want 30 months, fair enough. Are ye in favour of working with the department and farming bodies to go to those people and push a proposal forward that if you've a Board BIA approved farm and you're on your third movement and it goes to there, that there shouldn't be a problem, providing it's a Board BIA approved farm? It's the same animal welfare no matter where you go. And if you sell to Joe and he's Board BIA approved and he holds that animal for 30 days, that he's entitled, providing that they're Board BIA approved. And explain one thing to me. And you said you have scientific evidence. Well, I have facts of what happens, farmers. That last May, if you had cattle over 30 months, if they had 8 movements, if there were every piece of the dots that you're looking for that you hadn't, and the heifers, and you'd get the flat rate regardless of what they were, or for cows the same. Because there was one simple reason: you had your tongues out for them. And go 3 or 4 or 6 months later, why then, if that was the case that you needed all these things, and I'll show you proof of it, those cattle killed and there wasn't a question, why then for farmers that were under 22 months later on, that they were ringing factories, couldn't get their cattle killed, so they got hit because they went over the 22 months? Why did you bring in a clause halfway through that you got rid of where you brought in a spec under 440 kgs? And the fella that had the big Charlie Bullock was got out the gate, he was cut down. Every excuse was used, guys. And I'll make no apology for saying it straight to you. What's gone on over the last 6 months to the farming communities and the small farmers in this country is outrageous, is scandalous. And what you have done, you have said that there's 34 or 5 factories in this country. Well, and you talked about employment. Well, I can guarantee you, you can keep pulling a dog's tail for as long as you like, but sooner or later they're going to bite, and they're ready to bite now. And there's either going to go one or two ways. Those farmers are going to get out if they're not going to be treated right by the factories, or else we're heading for landlordism, which are 1,300 friends that will produce the cattle of this country. And you mightn't like to hear that, but that's the facts on the ground when you talk to the farmers. And you can use all the scientific and everything you want, and yes, there is a problem in my view, because we have extra cattle, we have to get rid of them, and we need to work with exports. I agree with all that. But it is at a low ebb at the moment. And beef farmers, I come from a suckler neck of the woods, Donegal down to Clare, out to Longford. And they're sick to the teeth of factories, and they're sick to the teeth of losing money. And I'll tell you guys, if you're looking at upping the ante in the factories, and this isn't against factories, this is just pure blunt facts. If you want to go and make sure that the factories are sustainable going into the future and the farmer is sustainable going into the future, the acts need to change fairly quick, or it's over. It's over. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. And I mean, I think your own comments there summarise some of the big strategic issues, and I can come back and just say something about those in a few minutes. We've already talked in a few interventions around the 4 movements, the 30 months, the 70 days, and that is what the market is looking for. You know, it isn't a case of going back and saying we're not supplying the market to the specification that you require. I mean, somebody said earlier on another subject, we need to follow what the market is looking for and deliver it. And that's what we have to do, because we're part of a cog. We're supplying the markets that others are supplying as well. They are required to do exactly the same in terms of meeting market specifications as we are. And so the answer to the question is that if you do not do that, then your returns are even worse than they are. Can I go back to the point that Deputy Scannell made, and maybe I should have, and was remiss of not having made it earlier. We get it, like we understand and we hear the heat that's exploding around the room about returns in the market. We're not immune from that. We hear it. We have engaged with all of the farm organisations directly over the course of the last while on a number of occasions. We met Beef Plan in the last few weeks, and we had a discussion around all of the issues that we're discussing here. We completely understand the frustration of farmers. Why wouldn't we? You know, we have people that work in meat factories. We have people around here that have a role at primary level as well as representing the industry view on these things as well. When I mentioned that we were at 112% of the EU market back in March, April of this year, I think that is a reflection of what industry do when the returns in the market are strong. And what we see now, back at around slightly below 100% of the EU market, is we're operating in a different environment, one where the market returns are far poorer than they were in the earlier part of the year. And like, we've never seen the kind of existential crisis that we've had from Brexit, or at least it's unprecedented up to the point that we had again in the UK the connection between BSE and CJD back in that day, when we got locked out of loads of markets and we returned from that. And all we can do is hope that these returns will come back. But the problem is, I do not accept that processors are treating farmers unfairly. What I'm saying is that I think what they are dealing with is the problems that we discussed earlier. It is the particular problem in the European market and the consequences of Brexit, which when we got close to the point at which Brexit was to be delivered, the market contracted even further. The level of investment wasn't there, and the commitment to purchase wasn't there either. So these are but that doesn't make anybody here feel comfortable. It's not a comfortable place to be sitting to listen to a situation where market is inclined. But I would say also that we never sit here when the market is at the height. We never have a discussion around the market when the market is performing well. We never meet farm organisations when the market is doing well. And understandably, we meet them when things are bad. And we have to account for that. And we try to do that in as reasonable a way as we possibly can. Can I just take a few of the questions, and I won't labour on any of them. Deputy Corcoran Kennedy asked about the Foodwise targets and whether we felt that they were achievable. When you look at Foodwise, it's a programme which overlaps with its previous and subsequent programme. But this particular programme looked for an increase to 19 billion in the annual value of exports. I think it was 19.6 billion. And the baseline on that, from my recollection, was in the order of 9 billion or thereabouts. We're now at 13.6 billion as of 2018. And the trajectory looks fairly okay. The one uncertainty we have in the meat sector is whether we can deliver in the context of Brexit and how that goes, and that is critical to it.
I don't mean to interrupt, but
sure.
that target was put in place before Brexit was even talked about.
Before Brexit, yeah. It's not even mentioned, I think, in the SWOT analysis in Brexit. No. There is a reference to the UK market, but not Brexit. And that becomes a key part of the next phase. Now, by the time we have the Foodwise 2030, which I think it will be done next year, early next year, we at least hopefully will know the outcome of Brexit and we can plan around that. Deputy Fitzmaurice talked about feedlots, and again, I don't intend going back over the feedlot situation, but when you look at the figures going back over the last number of years, they have grown from 2013 from 223 to 338. The number of feedlots controlled by factories haven't grown. And I think you have to recognise that. You may not accept it, you may not want to hear it, but that is the situation. And we are talking about 5% being the representative value of feedlot-owned sites.
I asked you a question. Would you be concerned if 338 feedlots account for 17, 18, 19%, whatever figures, 300,000 cattle, that's the figures, regardless of whether they're factory or that we'll discuss that again? Would you be concerned if that moved up, that we would have 1,300 people producing, or 1,300 feedlots, regardless of who owns them, producing the beef of this country?
We would.
Would it be a concern of yours?
We would be concerned about that. But I have to emphasise, Deputy, we do not control that designation. That is not a decision that we control or that we make. The designation of feedlots is determined by the department.
When you look at 120,000 farmers or 130,000 farmers producing 80%, and that 20% can be produced by 338 set-ups, isn't that a worry for anybody in any country? And it cannot be. No matter how you dress it up, guys.
They're not all
Yeah, but hold on. I don't.
Wait on.
You're selling cattle out of this country produced by grass. Don't go telling me that 1,000 cattle in every farm is produced by grass.
Go ahead, Mr. Carrion. Just before you start, sorry, yeah. Would it be merit in I suppose there is, as you pointed out earlier on, a percentage of those feedlots, if I could use that word in inverted commas, are not factory controlled. If they were titled or given a different title, the factory controlled group, as opposed to, I understand the group as you're talking, but there will be a number of people who, for animal welfare issues, let's say, for example, have a same status as the feedlot, but wouldn't be the same thing. Am I right in saying that?
You're correct, Chairman. So you're correct. I mean, this status that's given, that is accorded by the Department of Agriculture, or the herd applies to the Department of Agriculture, first and foremost, I mean, what you're talking about is a TB-related issue. I mean,
Yes.
if they had had an issue, or if they had decided not to, I mean, it affords them an ability to buy in and also sell out.
And there's regulations around that as well. strict-
Well, absolutely, and those are only granted by the department. And I'd also further add that, you know, the reality is they are deemed restricted, and they're not eligible for some markets. You know, so I mean, there is a growth in it, and they are working against eligibility for some markets as well. So there are concerns around that, but I mean, they've been given this feedlot and factory title that they're all factory owned and feedlot, and that's not the situation, Chairman.
Okay.